Hi and welcome back to Daf Yomi Be'Iyan by Real Clear Daf. In this video we're going to explore the topic of Shiur B'Kinyan. So the case is found in a Brisa on Daf Samach Gimel B'Aleph Aleph in Baba Basra, and this is the case. Brisa says once a Levi sold a field to Yisrael, but he added a condition. He said, I'm selling you the field, but only on condition that the Meiser Rishon is mine. Meaning when you grow crops eventually and you separate the first tithe that you anyways have to give to some Levi, you got to give that to me. Says the Brisa, Meiser Rishon Shalal, the stipulation is binding, and Yisrael has to give his Meiser Rishon to this Levi seller. Although it's important to note, and we'll discuss later about this, that he doesn't have to give it to the Levi's inheritors once this Levi dies. It's only as long as this Levi is alive. But anyway, the Gemara asks a very basic question on this, which is that how could this possibly work in light of the famous halacha that einon of makne davar shelo b'la'olam? You can't do a kinyan on something that doesn't exist yet. And of course, the crops that this Yisrael will eventually grow and separate his first tithe from do not exist yet. So how is it possible for the Levi to acquire them now? And before we go to the answer, which is the main focus of the Shiur, I want to make a little observation on the question, which is, it bothered me. Why is this a question? Why do we have to deal with the problem of Einad Makna Davar Shelo B'Olam? Who says it's working through a kinyan? Who says that the Levi is saying he's acquiring the Meiser Rishon now? Why not simply understand here that the Levi is adding a condition? He's saying that I'm only agreeing to the sale on condition that you do something for me. Namely, you give me the Meiser Rishon. As you separate Meiser Rishon in the future, you have to give that to me. That's a condition, something you have to do for me as a condition that he's attaching to the sale. Much like, if you would say, I'm only agreeing to the sale if you do jumping jacks tomorrow. Would that be valid? It would be perfectly fine. You could add whatever condition you want. So why not say that's what's going on over here? And it wouldn't get into the problem of you can't acquire something that doesn't exist yet. So I think the answer is simple, but it's, I think, a noteworthy point. The answer is we have to go by the language that the Levi uses, which is, he says, Amanas Meiser Rishon Shali. The wording is, he says, it's only a condition that the Meiser Rishon is mine, it belongs to me. So it's clear that his intention is to actually own the crops. And that's why we have this problem that, you can't acquire the crops right now, they don't yet exist. Anyway, getting to the main part of this Shiur, the Gemara's answer is that the way it works here is the Levi is not saying that specifically that he wants to acquire the crops per se right now. Rather, he's Shiyur Shayarei L'makom Meiser. He is limiting, he is setting aside, he's excluding from this sale a portion of the land corresponding with 10% of the crops that will grow in the future. So he's not acquiring the crops, which don't exist. He is simply limiting the kinyan. He's not completely transferring the field. He is keeping a portion of the field for himself in a way that 10% of it will simply be crops growing from his field. That's how it works here. Now, the Rishbam explains, basically in terms of what's basically going on. If you're on the source sheet, it would be source 2. He says, what does the Gemara mean? What's the simple understanding of this? He says, a person wouldn't make a stipulation for no reason. And therefore, since, as the Gemara pointed out, the stipulation as is doesn't work because you can't acquire something that doesn't exist yet, we therefore reinterpret, and the question is, what exactly that means, so we'll discuss. We reinterpret and we say, really, it's this system of Shiur. It's a different mechanism. It's not a T'nai to acquire the future crops. Rather, he's limiting the kinyan of the land. He's not transferring all of the land. He says it's almost as if, not that he actually said that, but it's as if the Yisrael here is really just a sharecropper. He gets, he's a sharecropper that gets 90%, and the seller, the Levi, is the true owner. So, the problem is the following, though. The problem is, we mentioned earlier that the halacha is the Yisrael only has to honor this stipulation as long as the original Levi, the seller, is alive. Once he dies, the Yisrael doesn't have to give the Meiser Rishon to the Levi's Yarshim. The question is, why not? if you're telling me that what's really happening here is that the Levi did not part with all of the land, he kept part of the land, okay, well then when he dies, that portion should go to his Yarshim, who will then be entitled to that, 10%. So how does it make any sense? Now the Rashbam, source 3, addresses this, and his words just seem very mysterious. He says, well, over here, of course, the Levi did not explicitly state that he is using the mechanism of Shiur B'Kinyan, that he is actually withholding a portion of the land. And therefore, rather, how do we get there? It's through a diak, it's an inference. So since we are getting to this, we're arriving to this through an inference, so dai lanu, it's enough for us to apply the inference only regarding the Levi himself, but not regarding his inheritors. What does that mean? If in the final analysis we're saying here that the Levi meant that Shiyur Shiyur, he meant to not fully transfer the land. He's keeping a portion for himself, whether he said it explicitly or he implied it. What difference does it make? If in the end of the day he kept a portion of the land for himself, then it's his land and it should go to his Yarshim afterwards. And the Yisrael forever and ever should have to give 10% to all the generations of this Levi's family. So how do we understand this? So I believe we could say the following. If we understand, the simple understanding would probably be that what the Gemara means here is that, we're divining what the Levi really meant. He didn't say, of course, again, that he is limiting the transfer of the land. But what we're saying is he must have really meant that, because otherwise it wouldn't do anything, so he really meant to limit it. If that's the way you understand the Gemara, then I don't know how to answer this question we just asked, why it shouldn't apply to the inheritors too. Perhaps we could say, though, that the Gemara doesn't mean that we're saying this Levi seller actually meant to use the system of Shiur B'Kinyan. No, he didn't mean that. He made himself clear. He said, I'm doing the sale, I'm just adding a condition. What's the condition? On condition that I be the owner, I acquire the crops. Now, of course, as the Gemara points out, that doesn't work. So what then happens? Not that we say, well, he really meant something else. Rather, we, the court, or the halacha, has the ability to step in and make a little adjustment. Meaning because his intention in terms of his ultimate goal is clear enough. He wants to be able to, have rights to the Meiser Rishon going forward. So his goal is clear, just the means that he chose to get to that goal is, not valid. It's not going to work, because it's, trying to acquire something that doesn't exist yet. So the halacha has the ability to adjust the means to the end. We can, tweak the mechanism a little, and then it works out. Now it's a Shiur B'Kinyan, and that would work. That's fine. So we say, okay, that's the mechanism that's really happening here. But then I think it's quite understandable how it wouldn't, why it wouldn't apply to the Yarshim. As the Rishbam says, I think it fits in his language very nicely. Dai lanu, it's enough for us, meaning implying that we're involved here. The halacha is coming in and doing some adjustments here. But since that's obviously a controversial concept, we're not going to just apply that to every situation without any rules. We want to limit that as much as possible. So we're willing to sort of adjust the mechanism, make a little tweak with respect to allowing this Levi himself to enjoy the Meiser Rishon rights. But to completely uproot what he said, which was a condition having to do with the crops, and say, well, it's literally, he's doing a Shiur over here, and he's keeping a portion of the land for himself for all generations, that would be too extreme. So therefore, to mitigate it, we say, this is the compromise, if you will, we say, we're willing to tweak it, and say, okay, it's close enough to the concept of Shiur B'Kinyan to allow him to enjoy the Meiser Rishon rights, but not his Yarshim. So therefore, that could be a way to understand the Rishbam. Now, you still might have a complaint, you might object and say, what does this really mean? If you're saying that he said, I want to use mechanism A, how could we just come in and switch it to mechanism B? So to that I say that, true, if mechanism A and B, we're talking about, were totally different, completely different kind of mechanisms, then that would be a valid question. But if you think about it, the mechanism of a T'nai and the mechanism of Shiur B'Kinyan are not really so different. Shiur B'Kinyan, obviously, we understand what that means. It means that he is holding back a little bit. on the transaction. He's saying, I'm giving you the field, but minus whatever it is, 5-10% of the field. Tanai, even though you would say, well, condition, that's a totally different thing. The truth is, the concept in halacha of a condition is a similar idea. It's really a radical notion, if we think about it, which is that you're like pushing the gas and the brake at the same time. If you do a transaction, if you pull the trigger, then you can't, pull it back. You already released what you did into the world. If you do a sale, the sale goes through. What do you mean it's only a sale under certain conditions? So the answer is the Torah is mechadesh from Tanai b'nei Gad b'nei Reuven. We learned tonight from that no, you're able to sort of hold the transaction in the air. You could stop the effect of the transaction. You're able to have that control over it. So it's also a concept of withholding. And therefore, I'm suggesting that since that concept of Tanai and the concept of withholding a kinyan are not so different, therefore this is a situation where the halacha can tweak it and say, okay, at least for this person, we'll call it not a Tanai, we'll call it a Shiur b'kinyan, and so this slave will enjoy the rights to Meiser Rishon. But again, since it's this controversial and not simple idea of tweaking the actual mechanism that he said, therefore dai lano, it's enough for us to only apply it to the original person himself and not to his yarshim. Hope you've enjoyed the Shiur. Of course, you can find the daily audio recordings we have archived up until Baba Basra at realcleardaf.com and the Real Clear Daf app, and we'll see you in the next video.